Tricks or treats, fantasies, bats, pumpkins, and monsters, does it all remind you of something? Halloween. In this video we will meet 3 monsters considered legends by everyone. Dracula, Werewolf, and Frankenstein's monster. You are on the Wandering Comet. And welcome to the Halloween special. Werewolf or lycanthrope is a legendary being who is described as a human capable of transforming into a wolf or something similar to a wolf on nights with a full moon. Such legends are very old and find their roots in Greek mythology. According to the Metamorphoses of Ovid, Lycon, the king of Arcadia, served the flesh of Arcadia to Zeus, and Zeus, as a punishment, turned him into a wolf. Of wolf 9 years after a sacrifice to Zeus Lycaeus, a legend attested by the geographer Pausanias. In its cultural variants, the lycanthrope of the Greeks is the same as the Versipelia of the Romans, the Folkadlak of the Slavs, the werewolf or Dracopyre of the Saxons, the werewolf of the Germans, the Oberoten of the Russians, the Hamtamer of the Norse, the Loup-garou of the French, the werewolf of Brazilians and Central and South America, with his easy modifications of Lubicin, werewolf, Lubicho. In the legends of these peoples, it is always about the belief in the human metamorphosis into a wolf by divine punishment. Count Dracula, or simply Dracula, is a fictional character that gives title to the Gothic horror novel written by Bram Stoker in 1897. The character is the most famous vampire in fiction, and according to the Guinness Book, the fictional monster and villain with the highest number of media appearances, direct or indirect. The character is also credited in the novel as one of the forerunners of the origins of werewolf legends. Count Dracula may have been inspired by the voivode or prince, Vlad Tepes or Vlad III, who was born in 1431 and ruled much of the territory that corresponds to present-day Romania. At that time, Romania was divided between the Christian world and the Muslim world, the Ottoman Empire. Vlad III was known for the barbarity with which he treated his enemies. Although he was not a vampire, his cruelty fueled the imagination, so he soon passed into popular knowledge as a vampire. Vlad III's father, Vlad II, was a member of a Roman Christian society called the Order of the Dragon, created by local nobles to defend the territory from invasion by the Ottoman Turks. Hence Vlad II was called Drakel, dragon, and consequently his son was called Dracula, son of the dragon. The word Drakel, however, had a second meaning, devil, which was applied to members of the Dracula family by their enemies and possibly also by superstitious peasants. Legends also say that one day Vlad saw a villager with a dirty shirt and asked him if his wife was healthy. The villager said yes, and his wife had both her hands cut off, and Vlad found another wife for the villager and showed him what had happened to the old one, to serve as an example. Vlad took pleasure in eating in front of his victims with their impaled bodies, listening to their screams of agony. Many of these feats lead to believe that Vlad III is the main inspiration for the character. The belief that Count Dracula is the undead came from the fact that in one of his many battles he took a severe blow to the head, which left him in a coma. After seeing their leader fall, his men retreated, taking his body with them, and before the escape was made, Vlad III awoke from his coma as if nothing had happened, and soon after regaining consciousness returned to battle, leading his army to victory and victory. One of his bloodiest battles, thus creating the belief that he had returned from the dead as the living dead. Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus is a Gothic horror novel inspired by the Romantic movement, written by Mary Shelley, a British writer born in London. It is considered the first science fiction work in history. The novel tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, a natural science student who builds a monster in his laboratory. Mary Shelley wrote the story when she was just 19 years old, between 1816 and 1817, and the work was first published in 1818, with no credit to the author in the first edition. Currently, it is customary to consider the revised version of the third edition of the book, published in 1831, as the definitive one. The novel is narrated through letters written by Captain Robert Walton to his sister as he leads a nautical expedition seeking passage to the North Pole. The ship under Captain Walton's command runs aground when the sea freezes, and the crew sees Victor Frankenstein's creature traveling in a sled pulled by dogs. Then the sea churns, freeing the ship, and on an ice raft they spot the dying Dr. Victor Frankenstein. Upon being picked up, Frankenstein begins to narrate his story to Captain Walton, who reproduces it in his sister's letters. Victor Frankenstein begins by recounting his childhood in Geneva as the son of a Swiss aristocrat and his adolescence as a dedicated and talented self-taught student. At this point, he introduces Elizabeth, raised as a foster sister, and Henry Clerval, her longtime friend. Frankenstein is interested in the natural sciences, and ends up studying books by master alchemists, mainly Cornelius Agrippa, Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus until the age of 17, when his parents sent him to study at the University of Ingolstadt, in Germany. However, before his departure, his mother died. Upon arriving in Ingolstadt, the young Victor seeks out his future masters, who vehemently condemn the study time devoted to the alchemist masters, and introduce him to the modern natural sciences. Committed to discovering the mysteries of creation, Victor studies feverishly and ends up discovering the secret of the generation of life, which he refuses to tell his interlocutor, Captain Walton. Frankenstein then dedicates himself to creating a gigantic human being, sacrificing contact with his family and his own health, and after 2 years he succeeds. However, Victor becomes disgusted with his creation and abandons it, fleeing. He is found by his friend Clerval, who has come to Ingolstadt to study. Exhausted, he succumbs to fever, being cared for by his friend for months, until he recovers. Victor Frankenstein receives a letter from his father reporting the murder of William, his younger brother, and asking for his return. Upon arriving in Geneva, he is informed that Justine, a very dear servant of the Frankenstein household, is accused of the crime, being found with her the jewel that the boy had taken before disappearing, and that was not with the corpse. Even so, Victor is convinced that Justine is innocent and that the real culprit is her creature. But the evidence against her is strong and Justine is sentenced to death and executed for the crime. Frankenstein begins to feel guilty for creating the monster, and secrecy and guilt begin to torture him. Fighting despair, Dr. Frankenstein decides to climb Mont Blanc. During the ascent, he is encountered by his creature, who is surprisingly articulate and eloquent. The monster tells its story, narrating how he escaped from Frankenstein's laboratory to a nearby forest, where he learned to eat fruits and vegetables and use fire. However, when encountering human beings, he was always chased and beaten, so he ended up hiding in the woodshed attached to a hut. There, he observes through cracks in the wall the life of a poor family of ex-nobles, clinging to them and helping them in secret. The family consisted of a blind father and 2 brothers. He learns the language and writing by spying on the lessons given to his brother's Arab bride and finds books where he learns about life and virtue. After a long time he takes the courage to introduce himself to the family and manages to talk to the blind father, but when the children arrive and see him with their father, they also chase the monster and flee the hut forever. The creature becomes embittered and decides to seek out its creator, whose diary he discovered in the pocket of the coat he took from the laboratory on the night of the escape. During the crossing he is always attacked by humans. Upon arriving in Geneva, he finds Victor's younger brother William and kills him, later framing Justine. At the end of his story, the monster demands a promise that Frankenstein will build a female for him, promising in turn to leave humanity alone and go live with his bride in the South American jungles. If the scientist refuses, the monster promises to put him in unimaginable torment. Extremely upset, Frankenstein agrees and, upon returning to Geneva, becomes Elizabeth's betrothed, leaving with Clerval for England to fulfill his promise. In Great Britain, Frankenstein, after passing through London, where there were the latest advances in the natural sciences, and some cities in Scotland, goes to one of the islands of the Orkneys archipelago, where he begins to build the female. However, he changes his mind, fearing to create a race of monsters that could turn not only against him, but against the entire human race. After making several considerations, Frankenstein decides that he must suffer the consequences for his actions and not for humanity, destroying the incomplete creature. The monster follows the act and swears revenge. He then murders Clerval. Frankenstein is even accused of the crime, but is acquitted for having a strong alibi. His father comes to pick him up and the two return to Switzerland. Even devastated by guilt and sadness, Victor marries Elizabeth and on the same day leaves to travel on his honeymoon. On their wedding night, he is watching the house, fearing the creature will attack him, but the monster attacks Elizabeth and strangles her. Victor returns to Geneva and, with the news of Elizabeth's death, his father falls ill and then dies. Vowing revenge, the breeder proceeds to pursue the creature, which takes him on a long hunt northwards, continuing through the frozen seas, where they are eventually spotted by Captain Walton and his crew. The explorer's ship is trapped in the ice and Victor, already quite ill, ends up dying. Captain Walton then surprises the creature in the cabin, on Frankenstein's deathbed, lamenting its creator. She tells Walton that there was nothing left to fear, as her crimes ended with Frankenstein's death, promising to go to the far north and commit suicide there, bringing peace to humans.
Don't be afraid. He won't hurt you. Come.
What about you? Which of these stories did you like the most? If you are enjoying the Halloween special, subscribe to the channel to be able to watch the video of the Halloween story that will be out on the 31st. Happy Halloween, and see you till later.